and welcome to Frontline Conversations. I'm Abhinav Chakraborty, and today I have Mr. Amrit Mathur with me in the studio. As cricket legend Sunil Gavaskar says of Mr. Mathur, he is a real all-rounder. He has indeed donned many hats during his time in Indian cricket. He has been a journalist, an administrator, the Team India manager, a tournament organizer, which was the 1996 Cricket World Cup held in the subcontinent, even an umpire in first class cricket. Mr. Mathur now has his memoir out, and it is called Pitside, My Life in Indian Cricket. It is a ringside view of what is easily India's favorite obsession, which is cricket, over the last 3.5 decades. It's filled with interesting stories, insightful anecdotes, and memorable profiles of some of the biggest names in Indian cricket. I welcome you, Mr. Mathur.
Thank you very much.
First of all, congratulations on the book. I really enjoyed reading it.
Delighted that you enjoyed reading it. I'm very happy.
So in the initial chapter, you talk about how you decided to write this book about after much deliberation. So tell us about the process of writing it. How long did it take you to write it? What went through your head when you were recollecting everything? Please tell us.
Actually, the process wasn't difficult. The more difficult part was to decide to write, because this has been with me for a very long time and I never got around to doing it. Then I realized that I was privileged to be at important moments of Indian cricket, and I had the opportunity to be there, and I'd seen iconic moments, great performances, important sort of milestones. So after a lot of deliberation and a lot of uncertainty, I decided to write. And the doubts were, A, is anybody interested in what I have to offer? I'm on the fringes of Indian cricket here. So would anybody be interested? There's no scandal I have to reveal. There's no scam. There's no major gyan I can give. There's no breaking news kind of information to share. So those are the doubts. But ultimately, I decided to do it. And I'm glad I did. And a large part of the book has been written as a tour diary, because on major tours, say to South Africa, Pakistan, England, NatWest thing, that the chapters are in terms of what happened on a particular day, pre-match, during the match, team meeting, in the evening over dinner. So there's a lot of stories about cricket. There's also a lot of off-field stuff like what happens in a TT tournament in the team room, or a golf putting competition in a hotel corridor. But there's also serious cricket. So the process wasn't difficult, and even the writing wasn't difficult. But sometimes it was difficult to choose what to write.
You spoke about the South Africa tour just a while ago. And my next question is going to be about it. So you were the team manager of the men's cricket team in 1992 when India toured South Africa as part of a friendship tour. So from your account, it comes off as quite an eventful tour, be it the Kapil Dev versus Kepler Wessels incident, or you have the infamous Manoj Prabhakar interview, or even meeting, the eminent South African leader, and then he later became president, Nelson Mandela. Considering that all cricketing action in the country involving international teams prior to that were considered rebel tours, like throughout the 70s and 80s, you had so many rebel tours. You had the West Indies go, you had English players go. So, could you tell us how significant that tour was, like for the sport in a larger sense, both on and off the pitch?
Listen, I think it was very significant, more so for South Africa, because this was after the readmission, the first sporting team, not just cricket, any sporting team to tour South Africa. So in a way, it was path-breaking. Politically, it was a minefield because India did not recognize the government of South Africa. We didn't have any diplomatic relations. Our passports those days were stamped not valid for Israel and South Africa. So you are going into a political arena and an area where A, you're not supposed to be, and secondly, there's no assistance. It's a very volatile, uncertain political situation in South Africa. Mr. Mandela has been released, but still not in power. You still have de Klerk and the earlier apartheid government still around. So politically, a bit of a tightrope to walk, who to associate with, where to go, whom to meet, whom not to meet, and no assistance. There's no Indian mission there to guide you or something. So you're alone. cricket-wise, also from the Indian perspective, I find it, like going into completely uncharted territory. We assembled in Bombay one day, took a flight out next day, no preparatory camp, nothing. We were a total group of 17, which meant 14 players. Mr. Wadekar is coach, me and Ali Irani as the physio trainer, everything else. So consider that with what happens now, that you're a team of 15 and you're a support staff of 20. So we went there with almost no support staff. In fact, very often I and Ali Irani would help out with the fielding drills. Can you imagine that you're an Indian team with Azharuddin, Kapil Dev, Ravi Shastri, Tendulkar, Srinath, Kumble, and somebody like me and Ali are helping out with fielding drills because there's nobody else.
Right.
And nobody knew anything about the tour in the sense that conditions, venues, pitches, players, zero information. I think Ravi had played with some South Africans in the county circuit, playing for Glamorgan, but otherwise, no information whatsoever. I remember in the first team meeting, somebody got up and asked, "Ye Kepler vessel's gone hai?" And Kepler was captain. Kepler played
Mentions that in the book, yeah.
He made a test 100. So that was the level of ignorance and the lack of preparation, information about the tour.
In the next, there's a chapter about the 2002, NatWest series.
Yeah.
And you write about how dressing room sanctity has become so yesteryear. I'm quoting you from the book. This is with reference to the altercation that happened during a game between then coach John Wright and Indian batter Virendra Sehwag after Sehwag got out playing a rash shot. And this incident became public only years later. You mentioned that how Lakshman happened, VVS Lakshman happened to mention it during a commentary thing.
Yeah.
And of course, John Wright wrote about it in his book. And you do mention, the influence of social media and, invasive press coverage, how invasive press coverage has become like over the years. But what do you think is the deeper reason, like for this statement of yours? It's like, is it a change in team culture? Is it a change of generation?
I think it's more generational and how everything else has changed around cricket. The coverage is more intense. There's much media. There's much more media. There's not just the print and television. Now there are so many other media platforms. Everybody interested in cricket. So everybody's looking for stories and information, and it's more aggressive. Secondly, I think because of social media, the players themselves are putting out information now. They all have their Twitter handles, Instagram, things, and in a strange way, player is also compelled to do it because the number of followers he has determines his market price in terms of endorsements and commercial contracts. Mm-hmm. So there is a need and an urge to put out more information. So in that context, if something similar had happened now in the dressing room, there would be dhamaka. It would be top news for God knows how long, and it would be sensational. It will be breaking news. It will be all kinds of things. And compare it to what happened there, nobody mentioned it. And I remember we traveled from Oval to, I think, Durham, where Tendulkar put his hand up in a team meeting and said what happened between Viru and John should remain here. And that's how it did. And for several years. And I think it's not just the team culture, but all everything that surrounds cricket that has changed. And I think if anything, even much smaller happens in a dressing room now, it will be out in a moment.
You were also part of the Indian contingent for the 2003 World Cup in South Africa. You went as media director.
Yeah.
So my question is that we've had many great Indian teams, in the past, be it Ajit Vadekar's bunch, which won in, 70-71 in West Indies and England. You had Kapil's Devils in 83, or even that core group which went on to win the World Series in Australia, in 85. Then we had Dhoni's men, who were arguably the finest cricketing side in the world between, say, 2009 and 2011, up till the World Cup triumph. And, or even more recently, we've had the Virat Kohli, Ravi Shastri team, which did so well overseas in Test cricket. So we generally tend to remember only the teams that won a specific tournament, It's like, so we had the ODI World Cup winning teams in 83, 2011, or the T20 winning World Cup winning team in 2007. So where do you rank Saurav Ganguly's team or that core group from 2003 among
But
India's
I
sides?
think it's occupies an important position because midway during the tournament, India was almost on the verge of exiting. We remember we had a game in Kenya, which was must-win game. Had we lost that game, we would have been out. And we started off badly. There was a terrible loss against Australia, which invited a lot of criticism and a strong backlash in India. So the turnaround was sensational. That you won, great games against Pakistan, you won a great game against England, and then into the final. So I think the turnaround was sensational. And only the other day I heard Sachin during the first game of the World Cup the other day, and he said, "Listen, I was a ball boy in one World Cup,
87.
and I played 6 World Cups, but my strongest memory of the World Cups is the 90 odd I made against Pakistan during 2003 at Centurion." So that actually gives you an indication of how close the players think of the 2003 campaign. And if you ask Dravid, if you ask Saurav, they'll say this is one of our biggest regrets that we went so far and we had a bad game in the final.
In the chapter on the historic 2004 tour to Pakistan, where India won both the ODI and the Test series, you write, the tour was proof that sport can ease tension, heal wounds, and create goodwill. At every stage in Pakistan, for the players and visiting fans, there was nothing but warmth, goodwill, and dosti. It reminded me of one of my favorite cricketing books, which is Rahul Bhattacharya's brilliant account of the same tour, Pandits from Pakistan.
I think it's a wonderful book.
Beautiful book.
Yeah.
And, in this same chapter, you ended that chapter with an interesting incident from 2015, which sort of captured where India versus Pakistan cricket, bilateral cricket sort of stood, So my question is that should more be done to promote bilateral cricket with Pakistan? Because there was a time, following the 2004 tour for 3-4 years, we had bilateral tours, every year, Pakistan would come to India, India went to Pakistan. So, so do you think that should more be done to promote bilateral cricket with Pakistan? And if yes, what is really needed to make that happen? Because you mentioned that incident where Jagmohan Dalmia, stood his ground when he got a phone call from the government and someone senior in the government. You don't mention that person by name, but
don't ask me also.
Okay. So, but anyway, the Indian government, someone really senior in the Indian government calls him and tells him, scrap the tour. And he's like, I am the boss at BCCI and I want this to go ahead. If you want to scrap it, go ahead and scrap it, So what do you think?
Listen, that's Mr. Dalmia.
That's Mr. Dalmia.
That's Mr. Dalmia. But listen, you, as a cricket fan, you, me, everybody wants India and Pakistan to play. It's good cricket. And it's also cricket which keeps you very invested. That's one game you want to watch. So my experience of Pakistan, I've been involved with Pakistan for a while in cricket because when you were in Pilcom, we worked very closely. I was a part of Pilcom, so we worked very closely with Pakistan and the Pakistan Cricket Board. Then before the 2004 tour, I was part of the security recce trip which went, and after that the tour happened. And that tour was, successful in every way, the 2004. From the cricket standpoint, good for India because we won everything. Off field, I think everybody was surprised at how friendly, warm, welcoming the Indian team was in Pakistan. There are numerous stories which I think have been listed by people, including Rahul, in a wonderful manner. And I experienced it, everybody else experienced it. There was no friction at all at any stage, whether among the fans, among players, or among everybody else. And just to give you a couple of examples, there was Balaji on the tour. And surprisingly, Balaji was a rock star for some reason. He was Amitabh Bachchan.
Balaji zara dheere chalo chan se.
So Balaji was Amitabh Bachchan and Shah Rukh Khan put together. And we were invited to LUMPS, which is their top management institute, and you had an auditorium screaming Balaji, Balaji, as if some entertainer has come, to perform.
Right.
We went to Wagah, and we were sitting on the Pakistani side, and the Pakistani side was chanting Balaji's name. And after a while, the Indian section realized what was happening, and here, people from both sides welcoming Balaji. And Balaji was very embarrassed by all this attention. And I remember him saying, "Ye to sab theek hai, but who will remember me in Chennai?" So I think it was a wonderful tour from the perspective of easing tension, improving relations, and from a cricket standpoint, absolutely sensational with Sehwag making 300, Dravid making a 270 at Pindi. A phenomenal one-day series, especially the first game at Karachi. Everybody remembers Kaif's magnificent catch, which sort of turned around in the first game. So lovely memories from cricket and non-cricket side both.
Right, but what more can be done? It's like, where is why aren't we getting more India Pakistan?
Well,
Political will.
Listen, you know the reason as much as I do. It's a complicated issue at the moment because of the governments being at whatever stands they have, and maybe I don't see it happening for a while. And we haven't played bilateral cricket for quite some time.
One of the parts which I really liked in the book were the profiles towards the end, in the chapter Game Changers. What I noticed was even though you had this unique opportunity, unlimited access, the journalist can only dream of such access, the kind of access you had. You had this unique opportunity to interact with people you profiled. There were former cricketers like Tiger Pataudy, Sunil Gavaskar, Sachin Saurav, Rahul Dravid, IPL's founder chairman, Lalit Modi, or even politician administrators like Madhav Rao Sandhya and Arun Jaitley. You observed them at close quarters, but what I found was that your portraits were quite intimate, but they were never fawning, it even bordered on affectionate, but you were not fawning over them, even when you were criticizing some of their faults, especially in the case of, say, Lalit Modi, it seemed like a very fair portrayal of these people. So how did you maintain that element of fairness when you always knew that there is a good chance of these lines getting blurred because you know these people personally and you're profiling them?
The thing is that, the players I've interacted with over a long time, Sachin, Saurav, Mr. Gavaskar, Rahul. So those, there's a sort of comfort built over a number of years. So I don't need to be, there's no need to be for me to be fawning and things. But I'm part friend, part acquaintance, but I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the person. So I'm not a normal cricket fan who's looking at some cricketing legend or an idol and then writing. And these are personalized accounts. And I'm not writing about Tendulkar the player or Dravid the player or Saurav the player, because the whole world knows about their cricketing achievements and their cricketing, career. So I'm only writing whatever I've dealt with them in my interaction. So it's personalized. Tiger, I was fortunate to know, because Tiger is Tiger, and I was fortunate that I got to know him early when I was very young. And I think I was foolish that right from the beginning, for some reason, I addressed him as Tiger. And I later realized that people who played with him for 10 years would not take that liberty with him. And there's a very interesting story about Sunny Gavaskar, mentioning that everybody had a problem of finding out how to address him. And he narrates a story where he asked him a question and Tiger just looked at him, smiled and walked away. Sunny didn't get an answer. But Tiger I knew for a long time, he was very kind and gracious and very supportive. The administrators in terms of Mr. Jaitley and Mr. Sindhya, I worked with Mr. Sindhya for a very, very long time. And I think I'm fortunate that he found me, he trusted me on cricket. And I'm sort of glad that I'm worthy of his trust. I sort of worked with him for a very long time. And in fact, the entire reason for my being in cricket is because of him. I was a young railway officer. He was a minister. He sort of just appointed me overnight as Secretary Railway Sports, which put me on to the BCCI. And normally that position goes to somebody at least 15 years my senior. Then we were together on Pilcom. He was board president. I worked with him. So I think in a way he gave me a cricket credit card with lifelong validity, which I'm still using. So I'm very grateful to him that he found me worthy. Mr. Jaitley also I got to know, and Mr. Jaitley was a complete cricket person. I remember that very often I'd go to him for some work because I was CEO at Delhi Daredevils and he was the president, and there were many occasions where I needed to go to him, and he would give me time immediately, and I would get my work done in 2 minutes. But he was never in a hurry. He would want to chat about cricket. So, but I think both Mr. Scindia, Mr. Jaitley were deeply, deeply concerned about cricket. And they were not just passionate cricket lovers. They wanted to make a difference, and they were very good people. Mr. Dalmia was a bit different. He was a hardcore administrator, unlike Mr. Scindia and Mr. Jaitley. And actually, it's Mr. Dalmia who put Indian cricket and BCCI on the world map. He was the first person to go to the ICC. He was the first person to make India respected at the global level, and respected, maybe even feared. And the beauty about Mr. Dalmia was that he understood numbers. I give no credit to anybody for bringing money into cricket. Money is there. Money comes automatically into Indian cricket. So nobody can take credit that I got X amount of crores into BCCI. Money comes on its own. What Mr. Dalmia did was he maximized that money. So if the deal was 10 rupees, he would make sure to get 15. Because he had this way of extracting the maximum value out of a cricket deal. Secondly, I've never seen anybody more prepared. He was never tired, ever. And if he was a cricket player, he would be playing all three formats today and never ask for a break. Mr. Dalmia was 24/7.
Now, early on in the book, you write about how it was quite clear to you, like in your initial years, that the BCCI leans towards control rather than cricket. You've also mentioned how the running of the sports body was akin to a democracy that was tightly controlled. Dissent was discouraged, and decisions were taken in backroom deals instead of the boardroom. And you also wrote how it works on a presidential system where the president has almost unlimited powers of patronage. We are currently in a situation where we do have a cricketer as BCCI president, which is Roger Jubbani, and earlier we had Saurav Ganguly. But the real power seems to be wielded by someone else, in this case, the BCCI secretary, Jai Shah. Do you have a stand on, former cricketers being in control of administration to perhaps move that focus, on cricket itself? Because you say that, it leans towards control rather than cricket, So maybe, do you have a stand on that? And because there are so many things, about, say, the state of domestic cricket as opposed to IPL. You mention all these problems in your book. Or even the state of women's cricket, what it was at one point of time, and, the long way that it has come from that point. So, so what do you have to say about that?
See, firstly, the BCCI has always been run by a few people. The top decision making is done in a restricted manner. That's always been the case. I've seen it from the end, from the time I was in the BCCI, late 80s, early 90s. From then, successive presidents or powerful secretaries have run cricket. That's how it's done. And to give you an example, the shortest BCCI meeting is the AGM. So where you have, agenda which goes into 50 points, but it's always the shortest meeting. You meet in the morning, you're done by lunch. And the reason for that is there is consensus reached on major issues earlier, or on sensitive matters, you allow or you authorize the president and secretary to take a call. So it's not any different now from what it was earlier. in terms of the way it functions. Maybe it receives more attention now, but that's always been the case. Another thread running through BCCI is that at some times there seems to be not enough focus on domestic cricket, because the attention is primarily on the Indian team, the tournaments being organized, and I think more energy is invested in that side of cricket. Now you have 38 Ranji Trophy teams, after the addition of the Northeast teams. And that is the largest cricket network in the world in terms of first-class teams, in terms of number of matches, because you have under 14, 16, 19, 23/25 Ranji Trophy for men and women. So if you look at the sheer amount of cricket that's played, it is amazing. No, I think if you total the cricket played in Australia, South Africa, England, I think India alone has more cricket than all of them put together. We have these age group tournaments. So what the BCCI does is provide you a ladder. It provides you a platform. Listen, come here and perform. And come here and perform, and we'll give you the platform to perform and showcase your skill. And then you go up. But I think more needs to be done at the state levels. The state levels are pretty inactive in terms of promotion, in terms of scouting, in terms of coaching. Things are changing in some states. Some states are now, in the last 2-3 years, been very, very active. I'm not sure you know that this season, Karnataka sent its team to Namibia to play cricket, pre-Ranji. They went on a tour to Namibia. Some other states are thinking of sending their probables of Ranji to Sri Lanka and others because there's rain in their venues. I think one of the Ranji Trophy teams sent its entire group to Pondicherry to practice. So things are changing. But I think more effort needs to be on coaching, cricket development, grassroots, state level.
And what about, placing former cricketers, in control of administration? Or
Listen,
there
have been many cases
right.
of cricketers being running state associations. Very recently, you had Brijesh in Karnataka, you had MSK Prasad in Andhra, who did a terrific job. You had Sanjay Jagdale at Madhya Pradesh. You had Vikram Rathore in Himachal. Many such instances. But I really don't think that you need to be a cricketer to be a good administrator. And either way. So it's a matter of competence. If the competence comes from a cricketer, great. If the competence and efficiency of running the state association comes from a non-cricketer, fine with me. I've seen both sides. I've seen excellent non-cricketers as sports administrators. I've seen serious cricketers not succeeding as cricket administrators.
Right. Moving on to what we have an ongoing World Cup, ICC World Cup that's started on October 5. So how do you rate the buzz around the tournament? There was much delay in announcing the schedule, and then there was a rescheduling because of the India-Pakistan game, and which meant because it was so there was so much delay, a lot of fans abroad could not book tickets, in advance. Not to mention the largely empty stands during the opening game at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad. We've also seen fans complain about stadium experience, and not just like recently, but even during the IPL or even in bilateral tournaments. So how do you compare first the buzz, compared to say 96 and 2011? And
I actually feel the buzz is not as much as I would have expected. And all the conversation and the buzz is only about India winning. It's not about the World Cup. The entire conversation is centering around India jeetegi kya, and will Rohit Sharma do what Dhoni did, what Kapil Dev did, etc. So I think there's a shift in terms of from cricket to the Indian team. So that again is I think a reflection of the time we are living in, that everybody identifies more closely not with the game but with the top stars, and the national team. It's not a matter of good and bad. It's just an observation. You spoke about the problems of ticketing, etc. Those are genuine issues, and I think it should have been done much in advance. Recently, I think the ECB has put out their schedules for 2024 and 2025. There's a ballot on for the Lord's Test match next June. Wimbledon does it. The British Open Golf does it. So I think we are far behind in terms of that kind of certainty to be offered to a fan to enable him to make bookings and organize his travel. In terms of the stadium experience, I think there has been a major change for the better, because we were at a very low end 10 years ago. But thanks to IPL, there has been improvement, because the IPL teams realized that they want the fans to come back. They have to organize 7 matches in 6 weeks. So if he's pissed off, it immediately affects ticket sales, which is a major revenue source for them. So while we are nowhere close to Australia or England in terms of standards and facilities at the stadium, there is improvement. I think there has been massive investment for this World Cup. I think some stadiums have been transformed. I saw pictures of DDCA Kotla. They look damn good. I couldn't go for the game today. But I think there is an improvement, and there's awareness that you need to do it. And if the facilities are not up to scratch, there is criticism now. Earlier, there was no criticism. You just lumped it. You went there. You were pushed around by the police or security. You had problems going in, no parking, maybe dirty loose, and you accepted it and you went back. Now there is a noise that if because you're paying good money and you expect a certain level of arrangements at a big game. So I think we are getting there, but we're still not at the same level as Australia, England, and elsewhere.
And my final question, when I'm coming to the Indian team, what do you think about the squad that is going to play in the World Cup and its chances at winning? Can we
listen? I think it's the best Indian team which has been chosen. I don't think anybody can complain about somebody being omitted, or I think the best 15 or whatever has been named is there. At the same time, I think it's impossible to pick a team. We all want India to win, but you can't really explain and say, India hi jeetegi and not others. So as a fan, I enjoy the game. And if India wins, we are thrilled. But ultimately, I enjoy the cricket that's being offered by the top teams, whether it is even in small spells, a good knock by a Pakistani player, some good bowling by even Netherlands cricket or anybody. I prefer to enjoy the good moments of cricket quality and not just get obsessed with who's winning.
That's all from my side. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Mr. Mathur. And
thank you very much.
Delighted
to speak to you. And I've noticed that you read the book carefully, because what you mentioned. So thank you very much for having me here on Frontline. Pleasure.